Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tea with Tara. Today, we're going to do something a little different. Tables are turning, and I am actually going to be the one being interviewed by my lovely friend and fellow writer, Kabria Rogers. Hi, Kabria.
Hi, Tara. Super
How are
excited
you?
that you invited me back so that I get to play interviewer this time.
You do.
Um,
I'm excited.
let's jump in. When
Okay.
did you start writing?
Oh my gosh, as soon as I got a pen or a crayon in my hand. I mean, when I was a kid, I guess all little kids kind of they love to scribble and write on anything they can get their hands on. So, I'd write inside my grandmother's medicine cabinet, practice my autograph, which is weird, but I did. And so I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I would make books out of construction paper and I would fold them. I don't know what I wrote about, but I would staple them, and then I would go around my neighborhood and ask my neighbors if they wanted to buy my book for a quarter. I said, "Look, I just wrote a book. Would you like to buy it?"
That's so
So,
cool.
yeah,
Young
early
and
self-publishing.
industrious.
So, yeah, it
Um,
started very early for me.
okay, so to piggyback a little bit off that question, do you feel like you've always been committed to being a writer, or do you feel like you committed to being a writer a little bit later? When do you feel like you committed?
Definitely later. I mean, like I said, I've been writing a long time. When I was around 9 years old, I actually got my first typewriter, which one of my aunts gave me, a beat up old yellow typewriter, and I would pretend to be a journalist and kind of write the news and everything. But writing for me was always important to me, but it was more of a hobby. I really didn't see myself doing it professionally, or I never took it seriously until my somebody that I look up to, or looked up to very much, my great aunt Anna, was who lived in Florida, passed away now, but she said to me one day, she said, "You always wanted to be a singer," which I did because I wanted to be like Dolly Parton for a long time. "You wanted to be an actress, but I don't see you doing all of that because in between, you've always been a writer. Have you ever thought about doing that professionally?" And I thought, "No, I haven't." And she said, "Well, you need to look into doing that." And I said, "Well, how do you do that?" I was 21 when she said that to me, and I didn't have the faintest idea how to jumpstart a writing career. I mean, I was a paralegal, I was working for two older attorneys, and had no clue. I just knew that I loved to write. In fact, my bosses, when they didn't have a lot of clients at that point because they were in their 80s actually. So they would let me use their typewriter to type stories because they knew that I loved to write. So yeah, it was really my aunt that got me thinking about maybe this really is what I'm meant to do, because she never encouraged me to be a singer or an actress. I mean, she would say, if that's what you want, go for it. But she had a little ESP when it came to my writing career. And she said, "No, this is your path. This is who you're meant to be. You've always loved it. You just don't know how to do it yet, how to become a writer, but you will. You will go to college someday. You will be a writer." She knew it all. So I started getting serious about it when I was in my 20s.
That's exciting. I mean, I feel like a lot of writers that I've spoken to say that, like, I just always wrote, but I didn't quite know how to make it a thing. I didn't know how to make it a career. So that's awesome. What is your writing process like? Do you have a specific writing process?
Yes, I do, after going to Wilkes University and studying creative writing in their graduate program. Before that, I just kind of wrote when the mood hit me, but they really gave me a discipline. So now I try to write at least 3 days a week. I'm not always successful, but because sometimes I'm working all day. And the last thing, I'm not somebody that can write early in the morning. There are people that I know who get up at very early, 3, 4 in the morning, and I'm just not that. I mean, I get up at 5, but I do other things and I can't jump right into writing. And I am not somebody who can write at night. I cannot, burn the midnight oil and write 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. Can't do it. So I tried it, but I do try to stick with it during the week. I take the weekends off, usually to decompress a little bit. And I like to write at home sometimes. I do like to write in cafes. There's a cafe that I wrote a lot of my first book in called Northern Northern Light, and it's one of my favorite cafes. So so those are the places that I like to write, and that's really my writing process. I do outlines for my books. When I do a short story or an essay, I don't really, I just kind of write and fly by the seat of my pants and see where it takes me. But when you're working on an actual book, it's a little bit too much information to just sit and at the computer and let it just come out. You really have to have a plan.
Okay. Any other sensory things around your process? Like I know some writers like complete quiet, some people like background noise, some people like scent, some people mood board. Like, do you think there are any quirky parts to your writing process?
Yeah, I have to have complete silence. And I am very noise sensitive. I do not like noise. I think because I was an only child, so I grew up in a really quiet house. My parents were not really, I mean, not that they didn't talk. Well, my father didn't talk until I was about 10 years old, but he was very shy. But no, there wasn't a lot of noise going on in my house except for whatever I was making noise. So now I have to have a lot of quiet. And sometimes I can't get that in my apartment because there'll be people, if they're out there mowing the lawn or whatever, it does distract me because I also think I have attention deficit disorder. So every little thing, and I'm just like, I gotta be, and Northern Light is pretty, it can get pretty busy there, but I put my headphones on and kind of get rid of the noise.
Okay, I get that. As a fellow only child, I understand the need for quiet.
Yeah,
So I get that. Do you struggle with writer's block?
that's a good question. And a few other people asked me that too. Alyssa and Travis, they wanted to know. Yes, I do. There are people who say, no, there's no such thing as writer's block. I do believe that there is, and I do struggle with it. And I guess a better way of looking at it is sometimes I just don't feel creative. So I think Alyssa also asked in an email if I how I power through my writer's block. And the truth is I don't. I do what I always do. I run away and I get far away from writing as I can possibly get, because if I'm not feeling it creatively, I can't just sit down and regurgitate anything because it's not going to sound right. And if I'm not, I think the greatest thing about a writer is you have to feel the creativity, because if you don't, there's not going to be much quality. I still journal. I always write down my thoughts and feelings, but if I'm not feeling my story, I put it away for a while. And sometimes I've gone as long as a month without looking at it again. But I've got to be in that zone in order to do it. So that I consider writer's block or creative block, whatever you want to call it. I don't do anything about it. I run away.
Um, that that's fair and necessary. And that was one of like my later questions of like, do you ever take a break? I I think that we underestimate creativity, how much energy creativity takes. And we underestimate how much rest that we need to actually be at our creative peak, that like
Yeah.
discipline and rest need to live side by side. So I think for other writers who struggle with the like, I'm on a deadline, I want to get this done, I want to be done,
Yeah.
it's good for us to normalize that, nope, we all have moments where we're just not in it and we need to take a break.
Yeah, and also I want to say when I started graduate school in 2016, I think, and I was writing my first novel. It was actually my thesis, Look Back to Yesterday. Now, I knew that I wanted to start with a quote. I already had the quote, but I didn't really know. I had earlier versions of the story that were absolutely horrible. So now I had to write a whole new iteration and for my mentor, and I didn't know what to do. I felt really stuck. Now, in that case, because I was on a deadline having to turn in so many pages to my mentor, I went to New York for a weekend and stayed at the Roosevelt Hotel, which I don't even know if that's still there. But I went there and I went to see Jennifer Beals in person. She was doing an interview and I got to talk to her on camera, and I actually asked her a question about writing or something pertaining to my book. But anyway, and so I went to a cafe to have dinner, or a pub rather, Mulligan's Pub, and the waiter sat me right next to a huge picture of Irish writers. So I thought, oh, this is a sign. So I did have to get away in order to jumpstart that book. And it seemed to work, kind of got me back into the creative flow of things.
That's fun. The signs are all around us, right?
They are.
As much as we're trying to step away from the thing because we need space, it's usually when, inspiration strikes or you feel re-energized and able to like come back stronger and more clear. But tell me a little bit about what you're working on now, because I know you have work in progress going.
I do. I have a sequel to Look Back to Yesterday, which was my first novel, and this one's called Return to Yesterday. And I think I started the outline 2 years ago. So I'm already 2 years into the process. And I've been working on it nonstop. And then, of course, writer's block hits and I take my breaks. And I'm actually going to Massachusetts in a couple of weeks. So it's kind of a little, I'll be doing a book signing for my second book, but it's also a chance for me to get away from this area, and hopefully they have a lot of great writers that come from Massachusetts. So I'm hoping it'll spark something. But yeah, so I am working on the sequel to that.
How long did it I mean, and I know that it's different, but I am curious to hear your thoughts about how long it takes you to write a book. So, how long did it take you to write Looking Back on Yesterday? I think I said that right.
Look Back to Yesterday. Yep.
Look Back to Yesterday. And how long have you been? You said 2 years,
For
but
this new one, right?
is that just like brainstorming, free writing, not writing yet, just thinking about the book? Like, what does that timeline usually look like for you?
Well, with Look Back to Yesterday, I started that in 2009, actually, the very first original manuscript, which I still have, and it's very frightening to look at. But I started it a year after my father died, and when I decided it's time to put my writing career into action, because I had always wanted to be a writer, but I never knew how to do it, and I don't think I had the guts to do it. So I was finally in college. I was going to Lackawanna College, and I started it then, took 10 years. Then it was terrible, the first iteration of that. Went to graduate school, started again, and then I think that took me about 2 years, 2 or 3 years before it was finally published. And now this one is 2 years in the making. Oh, and I also, Dreaming Through the Eyes of God, which is my memoir, that took about 2 years also. So it all depends on how much I stick to it and or how much I get sick of it. And I know people don't like to hear that writers get sick of their work, but
We do.
sometimes you get tired. You get
We
really,
do.
you're sitting alone with these characters, and sometimes you go a little batty and need to get away from it.
Um, we most definitely do. Say that out loud as much as possible because I think I think that writing can look so different from writer to writer, but I also think writing from an external perspective for people who don't write, it can look a little glamorous, right? It can look a little bit like you're just creative, you're pulled by the pen and it comes out magic. But that's not what writing is. It's really
No.
messy. And like you said, you're just stuck with your characters, your ideas, your experiences. You're kind of like confined with this very personal part of your process. And you're just like, I am tired. I'm tired of
Yeah.
trying to make this work. I'm tired of making it math. I need a break. So say that out loud more.
Especially with rewriting. One of my favorite writers is Harper Lee. And when she was writing To Kill a Mockingbird, she was working on rewrites, and I guess her editor just kept sending, nope, got to do this over, got to do this over. She took the manuscript and chucked it right out the window into the snow because it just makes you crazy. I don't know who said it. There is a quote that said, writing is fun. It's rewriting that isn't, and editing
Oh,
is
yes.
completely horrible. I am not an editor. I hate editing. So
Um, I am not an editor. While I recognize editing is necessary and
oh,
rewriting is necessary, It's true. It takes so many different iterations to get to that published, beautiful piece.
Yeah.
So I think we should talk about that more. I think we should commiserate about that more. Um, but since I'm interviewing you and we're having a very like good tea with Tara, didn't you guys just celebrate? Didn't the web series just celebrate an anniversary, your 1 year anniversary?
Yes, it did. I never thought I'd be even doing it at all, much less for a year.
So tell me how that's been. Tell me how that experience has been and like how these conversations have kind of changed the way you think of the writing community and what it's like to have these great conversations with all different types of writers, and not just writers, right? Because usually writer is one adjective attached to the person doing it. So what has that been like?
It's been a really unique experience. First of all, I don't know what even possessed me to want to do this. I'm at heart a shy person, and I don't really like it's not that I wanted the attention focused on me by doing this podcast either. I think I was just attracted to the idea because I love anything creative and I love talking to writers. I've also interviewed a few actors. I love anybody in the arts and I love to hear their story. So being able to interview all the writers that I've talked with, it's changed my perspective in the sense that I've learned so much from them because everybody has their own unique way and their style of how they deal with things and their own writing quirks. And it's just interesting to me. And I think it helps me to grow as a writer because there are so many things that I admire. I admire the people who can power through the writer's block and who write every day, who try to write every day and who don't run from it like I do or want to, jump out the window because you can't take it anymore. I mean, I really admire those writers. So each writer that I've talked to has really brought so much to Tea with Tara that I never expected. I mean, they've taken conversations to places I never expected them to go. And I hope other people enjoy it as well, people who were thinking about becoming writers, because that's the whole reason I wanted to do this, so that everybody who's interested in writing or the arts could see how each writer uh, deals with situations, deals with their writing, deals with the writer's block, everything that they go through.
That's yeah, it's amazing. And watching, so I think that was one of your first interviews and watching like the way it's grown over the year, it most definitely has been inspiring and fun. Um, do you, where do you envision Tea with Tara in the future? Like, do you have big visions of what it could be? What would that look like?
Well, I'm actually running out of writers to interview. So I had a lot of writer friends, yourself included, and I'm running out of writers. So I thought, you know what, maybe I might because the title is Tea with Tara Conversations About Writing. So I'm thinking about dropping conversations about writing and just interviewing people just about their art form because I do love the arts. So whether you're a painter, a musician, I'm interested in it all. So I think I'm going to go in that direction next and still do the writers because I love talking to them. And I also would love to do vlogs, go around. I did a few. They're not really catching on just yet, where I've gone on some literary pilgrimages and tried to film writers' homes like Louisa May Alcott. It would be
Yes.
great to go inside those homes, but you need tons of insurance and they don't want you, just in case something happens, it's kind of hard to get in there in the writer's house. So I just do the exterior, give them a little backstory about the writer. But I would love to do more of that, more vlogging, because that seems to be what everybody loves to see. They love to go places that they don't go. So that would be something too that I'm looking into.
That sounds exciting and it's going to happen. I'm speaking it into existence for you. Um, there is something beautiful about being close to another writer, like not necessarily even famous, although the famous ones are cool. We have more information about them. But there is something beautiful and precious about being close to someone else's home or place of work or where they did the things because it can feel very solitary. So when you go their spaces that was their solitary space and their only space, you feel like, okay, this is what it's all about. This is what we all do. This is what we all need.
Yeah.
So
It is. When I was at Louisa May Alcott's house in Massachusetts, Concord, she her house was called Orchard House. So it was just so amazing. I'd been there in 2014, and then I went again last summer. Walking down the paths that she took, or seeing the trees that she would have looked at, and it is an amazing experience. I mean, it gives me chills to think that she was once there. That makes you think she's probably like, get off my property. Why are you here?
um, it's a community,
Yeah.
and it's a community even, amongst the living and the dead of people who came before us. So that's fun. I look forward to that in the future. What is your favorite part of the writing process? So, there are a lot of steps. There's a lot of editing, there's a lot of rewriting, there's a lot of conceptual things. What's your favorite part of the writing process?
Well, it's not the editing and it's not the rewriting. Although sometimes rewriting can be fun when I finally discover who the characters are. Because sometimes I'll do an outline and I'll think I know who these people are. And then and this is hard for people who aren't writers to understand. The characters take over. They start to tell you what to say, and I like that. I don't hear voices or anything like that, so please don't anybody get nervous. But all writers say that the characters start to take over, and then they tell you, "This is where I want the story to go." You have no clue, and that's true because they take on a life of their own, and I like that. I like when they take the reins. Although sometimes they kind of invade my head at night, and I'll be trying to sleep and they'll be coming into my mind with the story that they want to tell next. And I'll be like, go to bed. Shut it down, go to bed, guys. We'll talk in the morning. But I know people think just we're all crazy, but we're not.
We're not. It's part of the creative process, and it's true. Like one of the first things I learned in English class is that the writer is different from the narrator, which could be very different from the protagonist, which could be different. It's all different, and giving yourself over to that process. Because to your point, I've thought of stories and I'm just like, this is most definitely what's going to happen, and then I start to write it, and I'm like, that's me. That's not this character. That's not the storyline. I need to be true to this character. I need to be true to the storyline.
Right.
So that's true. And we do all experience it in different ways at different times.
Yeah, and it's important to understand too. I was just having this conversation the other day with someone. Some another fellow writer said sometimes it's hard because it's all been said before. It's all been written about. And I said that's true. There's nothing that writers write about that's unique. There's nothing unique in what we write, but there is in how we write it because we all have
Yes.
our own style and our own voice. So we tell the stories differently, and that's okay. We're never going to find all the information out there. I hate to use the word, but it's all regurgitated. It is. It's been covered 100 times since the beginning of time. So, but it's different how we each tell a story, and that's important because we all have something different to say about a certain.
Um, we all have something different to say, and but it also ties into that community bit and the human condition. Like love is universal, part of the human condition. Death and grief is part of the human condition. And how we process those things as creatives and as writers, while they're not unique or individual, how we bring ourselves to those stories are very unique and individual and necessary, right? It keeps us connected. So I think that, and I also think it's important for us to give ourselves grace in this. Are we trying to be original or are we trying to be authentic? And when we should always try to be authentic, but originality is like really not a thing because we're all experiencing these various walks of life and experiencing. What is the scariest part of being a writer for you?
I'm not too good with rejection yet. I mean, I'm getting better, but there was a time when my work would be rejected because I cared about it so much and I really believed this is what I'm meant to do. And when it would be rejected, when I was a little bit younger, maybe in my early 30s, I would cry. I mean, there would be real tears coming down. I think, oh my God, I'm terrible. And nobody wants to hear from me and I will never make it. And then I realized, it's really not about being a writer. is not necessarily about being published or how many times you're published. And it's not about being, I'm not Ernest Hemingway. I never will be. I may never be famous, and that's okay. You know, what is really important as a writer is being able to tell your story, whether one person reads it or a million. I mean, my books, they're not bestsellers by any means, but I appreciate the people who have read them and who have told me that they've made a difference in their lives. And that's all that matters.
Um, yes to all of that, because I think it's easy. Everyone wants to be published. Everyone wants to be a bestseller. Everyone wants to be acknowledged
Oh,
for
yeah.
what they do and what they love, right? Because to your point, it's emotional because we love it. It's scary because we love it. But the truth is, writers just need to write.
Yeah.
Um,
And I would love for my
and
book to end up on Oprah. I would love for her to pick it as, a book of the month. But if it never happens, I think I've proven that I'm true to being a writer because I keep going. I'm not rich. I'm not making, you're not making millions of dollars off of this. But yet I keep going. Like even people said, are you getting paid for Tea with Tara? No, but I love it anyway. And that's the important thing. If I was doing it for money, then maybe I would be superficial. But when you do something out of sheer love, I think that's more important than how much money you're getting or not getting.
yes, and also that usually when you start things with love, they grow into they grow monetarily later, but it starts with love. Um, so that actually brings me to a really important question. Can you name a moment in your writing career that had a big impact on you? So I know you mentioned your Aunt Anna, but like along the way, can you think of another moment where it impacted who you were as a writer?
I think probably meeting other writers because for the longest time, I mean, I looked up to my Aunt Anna and she really encouraged me, but I still didn't know any writers. So once I got in the writing program at Wilkes and met all these other writers who could finally understand me, that impacted me in a major way because up until that moment, you tell people you want to be a writer and they're just like, really? Why? They do that dog look like your dog gives you
Yep.
the side. And all of a sudden I knew people who understood where I was coming from. And then another moment actually involves all of us. When we did I Am Strength, that was the most amazing thing in the world when we were going on that little mini book tour and doing readings together and sharing that experience with all of you. I mean, that was one of the greatest moments in my writing career so far.
It was amazing. And I often say to people who ask me about I Am Strength, they're like, so what was that like? I was like, I feel like I joined a sorority of writers.
Yes.
I didn't pledge. I didn't have to do anything crazy, but it was like suddenly we were all bound by this really special book with very unique perspectives and life experiences. And then we got to go and share our perspectives and life experiences. And we felt you felt at home, you felt in community, you felt amongst good friends and you felt a sense of sisterhood. And that's special,
Absolutely.
it was the cornerstone stone in my writing career too, because you just everyone's awesome and unique and individual, and you feel like you found your people. You feel like you found your unique group of people.
Right.
Okay, so those were like the serious questions. Now I want to ask you some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
What's your go-to snack when you're writing?
Oh, well, I've had to give that up for Lent because I'm Catholic, so we give up stuff for Lent. Cookies, or I shouldn't just say cookies. It's actually anything with sugar.
Okay.
When I started writing in cafes, oh my gosh, I got addicted to the tea and the sweets, and it started to show. So, yeah, that's my go-to.
when you're in a cafe, you're like, okay, if I write this 500 words, I
Yes.
get a cookie. When I write this 500, I get a muffin. Like you're
Hmm.
like reward system,
And then I
I
start
get the
writing like
thing.
crazy, right? Just to get the tea
Right.
up. And I started out trying to eat the salads, and I'm like, this just does not feel right. It doesn't go with my tea.
I get it. I get it. You mentioned that cafes are one of your favorite places to write. So I'm gonna switch up the question. Where has where is one of the strangest places you've ever written? Like, can you think of a time that you've written someplace odd, not in your comfort zone?
Yes, in the bathtub. Let's get personal.
Seriously?
No, I didn't have paper in the tub, but like when an idea strikes, I had my phone in there, so I got my phone. All of a sudden, you're soaking and you're not thinking about anything, and an idea comes to you. So I'm on my phone just typing it out so that because if you don't write it down, you're going to forget. So you need to write
Yeah,
it down soon as you can.
that's awesome. It's true.
So
I'm
soak
like,
and
I need to
write.
write that down, and then it runs away from me,
Yes.
so when they drop on you, you have to catch it. That's awesome. What do you wish someone told you when you started to write?
I wish I had more people who were like my Aunt Anna who told me that I could do it rather than, you know, the naysayers who thought it was a waste of time. So, I mean, my father was around when I wanted to be a writer and he encouraged me. My grandmother encouraged me. I was lucky enough to have people around me who did encourage me, but when I actually became a writer, they were all gone. So,
Hmm.
then you come up against people that think you're insane. So I wish I would have had more people who said, follow your heart.
Follow your heart. Listen to the voices. They're helping.
Listen to the
They want
characters,
listen
not
to the
real people.
characters. Listen to the characters. Okay. What advice would you give fellow writers, no matter where they are in their writing journey?
Again, with the naysayers, don't listen to them. Keep going, power through it, keep moving on. Keep your dreams alive, not just in writing, but whatever you want to do. I think it's so important to be true to yourself because there are people who think that well, you should do this, you should do that. But at the end of the day, it's not their lives. I mean, I don't even, I'll probably catch hell for this, but I don't even believe in parents telling their kids what to study in college and what to be. You can't live your life for them. They have to find their own way. You can encourage them not to just sit around and eat potato chips all day, fine. But they've got to find their own way and follow their heart because that's just going to lead to disaster. And I know a lot of people whose parents pushed them into things they didn't want to go into, and they were very depressed and led very depressed lives, and that's sad. You have to be able to find your heart. It's not about how much money you're going to make. You need to live, but you shouldn't live for the money, and sadly too many people do that.
Um, yes, and all true. And that there are so many different ways to live in this world. You know,
There are.
there's so many ways to be successful. There are so many ways to be fulfilled. There are so many ways to have joy and be creative, that have absolutely nothing to do with money. And that, like, the truth is, all of us will persevere and we'll figure out how to make the rent or make the mortgage and find food, right? But the things that we live for should be the things that drive us and make us happy. um, if you could share your writing with any inspirational person, dead or alive, who would that be and why?
Probably Willa Cather because she's my favorite writer and I admire her very much. Although I think I would be a little skeptical. I would want her advice, but she was known as the meat axe because she gave really harsh reviews on acting and writing, and so she was not easy, but I could imagine that someone like Cather would probably challenge me a little more. So I would love to sit on a bench and just sit and talk to her and watch her rip my work and tell me I stink and start over again, kid. So
That's truly your heroes. um, I don't feel that way about many people, but even in my head, the people that I would want to read my work, I'm like, I don't even care if they give a bad review. I'm just happy they read it.
right.
So I feel that. Okay, those were all of my questions. Did you want to elevate any questions from your social media friends who had
Sure.
questions they
I
wanted to ask you?
absolutely. I got a few great questions from some relatives, some friends. Okay, so Michael, who is also a writer, he's my cousin. He asks, "What did you enjoy most about earning your degrees, and how did you handle family and friends who doubted your choice to go back to school?" Oh, Michael, you really want to start some drama here. Um, so I didn't go to college right away. After I graduated high school, I went to work, and I think I was too afraid to go to college because I never thought of myself as particularly smart, and I think I was a little bit afraid. And like I said, I run from things that scare me. So I finally went to college when I was 32 years old after my father passed away, or 33 maybe. And and it was a unique experience for me, but I was also sometimes you're bombarded by people who don't understand why you're taking what you're taking in college, like we just talked about, and they can be a little harsh. I mean, I've had people say sometimes, "Well, it's just why would you wanna do that? Why would you wanna go," or even to graduate school. I was 40 when I went to grad school, and I got looked at and I had comments like, "Why? What are you doing in graduate school at 40 years old? What you can do so much so many other things with your life. Aren't you a little too old for that?" I don't think that there's anything wrong with later in life accomplishments. We set too many weird standards, and we're conformed to think that you have to accomplish everything at a certain age, and I think that's just so foolish. As long as you're
Mm.
living and breathing and able, then you're able to do it. You can do anything you want. So, Michael, how do I handle family or friends? I ignore it and I keep going because if I would have listened to it, like Dolly Parton once said, if I would have listened to all the negative comments, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. And then he asked, "Is there any style of writing you haven't yet experimented with that you'd like to try?" I would love to be able to write more formal. I think that's a lost art. I don't think any of us really write like that. I think my writing is certainly not very lyrical or literary or formal in any way. Just ordinary language, which most of us write like today. But I would love to be able to write like Willa Cather or like all of the great writers that I would love to write like Harper Lee. I think they had a poetic way of telling a story, and I don't. So I'd love that. So Travis asks, "What writers do you find the most inspirational regarding how they conduct their lives and not necessarily the quality of their writing?" Again, Willa Cather, Harper Lee, and what I enjoy about them is that they defied convention. They broke barriers because it really wasn't. I mean, Willa Cather was born in the 1800s and died in 1947. So, and she went to college and she did what she wanted to do, and so did Harper Lee. I admire women writers, especially, who don't listen to what everybody thinks that they should do as a woman, and they just go out and they live their lives and they do it and they defy convention and they defy the social norms. I like barrier breakers. So that's what I admired about those writers. They didn't, they didn't end up married either. It's okay to be single too. Everybody told them they should be married. They didn't care about that. They did what they wanted to do. I think if we just all left each other alone to do it would be such a happy world instead of worrying about what everybody else is doing.
I mean, can I quickly insert that I agree with that? If we really could just lead with curiosity and kindness,
Mhm.
because there are so many different ways, like we were saying, to be in this, to be in the world, but to be in the creative world, right? And that no one has it figured out, in my honest opinion, before 30. I feel like I'm 34 and I'm just now starting to figure out who I am as a writer, what I want my writing to be, how I'm going to accomplish it. So if I also subscribe to this idea that I didn't do it before 30, so it's a wash, then I would miss out on potentially the next 40 years of my life doing more intentional things. And it's easier to just lead with curiosity. Like, not the why are you doing it, more like, I never would have thought to do that. Tell me more about that. It opens up the possibility for everyone, really.
Right. It really does. I mean, it's so important to just leave people alone, but as long as nobody's hurting you, we really have to live and let live because things are getting just, and I don't want to go into that, but yeah, it's a little contentious out there at the moment, with
It
everybody
is.
worried about it. And that goes for careers too. I mean, so many people were so concerned about what I wanted to do with my life. And, if I lived in a cardboard box in my backyard, it's really nobody's business. But, okay, Alyssa wants to know, how do you combat writer's block? Do you believe in powering through getting your words on the page, even if they're not good, or waiting until you feel more inspired? And do you have any methods of getting inspired to get your creative spark back once it's gone? So, like I said, sometimes I do run away from it a lot, but when I really want to feel inspired, I have a habit of going on YouTube and watching all documentaries on writers. I love to learn about a writer's journey. That really helps me to get my spark back. And sometimes I go to the cafes, hope to get it back. It doesn't always happen. Like I said before, I don't really power through it when I'm having an off day, week, or month. I just stay away from it because I can't really get it back like on the fly like that. So it has to come naturally for me. Um, but these are great questions. And then Angela wanted to know, what is the most influential book you have ever read, and how old were you when you read it? I think probably To Kill a Mockingbird when I think I was 16 or 17, because it spoke to so many issues that were going on in the country that needed to be corrected. And it was, again, Harper Lee, a barrier breaker, born in Alabama, lived in Alabama, went to New York to become a writer and to write about what was going on in the South at the time. So, and her character, Scout Finch, I always kind of identified. I love tough little tomboy characters that don't take any guff from anybody. So that's probably the most influential book.
For our non-writers who are watching this, what is like a quick overview of To Kill a Mockingbird?
A quick overview. Oh, you're really putting me on
I
the spot. Okay.
I know, I'm sorry.
Well, it's about Atticus Finch, who is an attorney, a single father, widowed father, and his two children, Jem and Scout, brother and sister. And Scout, the story is being told through Scout's eyes. And it's about all of the racial injustice going on in the South at the time. Also about a Black man who was falsely accused of rape, and Atticus Finch, who defended him as an attorney, and all of the white folk out there who didn't want him to do that. And of course, their lives are threatened. And there's also a great movie with Gregory Peck, if you want to see the movie and not just read the book. But it really tackled a lot of the issues that were going on and that still go on to this day. That's why the book is timeless.
So the reason why I wanted to do that, put you on the spot, I'm so sorry, Tara, is because we're also seeing, not fully going there, a lot of fans and controversy around the books that are being read or elevated. So whereas you have read To Kill a Mockingbird, we may have an audience that has not, or may have had a life experience which was intentionally set that they couldn't. So I feel like it's always good wherever I can to elevate how literature is important and necessary, and to seek it out, even if it's not something that you experience personally, to seek out stories, seek out these narratives, seek out these classics, seek out the knowledge where there are barriers, because we are allowed and empowered. We should be feel both allowed and empowered too. So that's why I wanted to actually give an overview.
Yeah, and that's why it's not, I don't believe in book banning, because I think you have to learn about what goes on, and we learn through writers. Even fictional writers write about what's happening in our times. We're recorders of history. and you can't
Yep.
ignore the truth. Ignoring it doesn't make it go away. But we learn. That's the most important thing about reading and writers, is that they teach us how to have empathy. You have to
Yep.
have empathy. See, there's a difference. Sympathy, we have sympathy when we identify. Like me, I lost my mom at 12. Well, it's easy for me to identify with somebody else who lost their mother as a child. That's sympathy. I have sympathy for them because I know what it's like. But empathy is when you haven't really gone through the experience, but you kind of place yourself in that space to see someone's life through their lens. You can't always look through your own lens. It doesn't work like that.
Yes.
You don't learn about anything. And we can't fix the problems in our world by just seeing everything the way we want to see it. So empathy is
Absolutely.
important, and writers bring you empathy. Reading brings you empathy if you really open yourself up and read correctly.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. It is a tenet of what we do. That's why writers are so important. And why, I mean, without going fully into that, I wanted to like take the moment in our conversation to elevate that. It's true.
Absolutely. It is very important.
So, are there any other questions from your friends on Facebook?
No, I don't have that many friends. I have a couple of questions. That's it. Everybody else is just it's Saturday. They're sleeping. I understand.
I still feel like it was an amazing conversation. I'm so happy you invited me back to interview you. I can't wait to see what is in store because I know there are great things in store. And I also can't wait to read your new book. I'm really excited. So
Thank you so much. And thank you for hosting. You were a wonderful host, asked great questions.
it was fun. It was fun.
It definitely
So,
was. And we got to get after Alyssa. We need another women's, book. We need another anthology. Alyssa, you listening?
I mean, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So just be prepared, Miss Wah. Just be prepared.
Well, thank you so much, Kabria. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thank
Bye.
you all for watching. See you next time on Tea with Tara.